There are many different training routines which all train each muscle group a different number of times per week. On one extreme, we have full body routines, which may train all muscles up to 4, 5, or even 6 times per week. And then on the other extreme, we have typical bro splits, which train each muscle only once per week. And then we have other training routines between these two extremes, which may train each muscle 2 or 3 times per week, such as a push-pull legs or an upper-lower split. So which of these routines is best for muscle growth? In this video, we will cover how many times per week each muscle should be trained to maximize muscle growth. Essentially, this is a question of training frequency. Frequency has two meanings in the context of hypertrophy training. One is the total number of training sessions we perform per week, and two is how many times per week each muscle is trained within these training sessions. It should also be understood that these two types of frequencies are interdependent, meaning that they both have an impact on each other. More specifically, the number of times we train each muscle group per week will be limited by the total number of sessions we train per week. For example, if we train 4 times per week, we cannot hit each muscle any more than 4 times per week. So before even thinking about how many times per week we should train each muscle, we should first establish how many workouts we will perform per week to establish our limitations. This is recommended for practical purposes so that we can ensure we maintain a consistent training routine. There is no point creating a high-frequency training program if we can't realistically get into the gym that many times per week. Then once you know how many times per week you will train, we can then start to think about the specific training split and how many times per week you want to train each muscle group. So assuming we have a set number of days per week we will train, we can now discuss how many times we should train each muscle across these days. Let's now discuss how muscle group frequency influences hypertrophy. The best evidence we have on this topic is this meta-analysis, which aimed to answer the specific topic of this video. The analysis found that when total weekly volume was equated, there was minimal effect of training frequency on muscle growth. However, there seemed to be a slight trend in favor of training with a higher frequency, although these results didn't reach statistical significance. I have brought this study up in a few different videos, assuming it was the most recent and best form of evidence that we have on the topic. However, one of my subscribers named Alvin pointed out that this may not be as conclusive as I once thought. He mentioned that some of the individual studies from the analysis used volume load to equate training volume rather than the total number of sets per week, which is generally a more applicable metric for volume for hypertrophy training, and this was in fact true. Because of this, I wanted to take a closer look at some of the individual studies which equated volume via total number of sets. And it seems that when volume is equated in this way, we tend to find slightly superior effects of higher training frequencies on muscle growth. For example, this study explored the effects of performing the same training routine with different frequencies on muscle growth. One group trained each muscle 5 times per week, while the other group hit each muscle only once per week, where chest was trained on Monday, biceps trained on Tuesday, legs trained on Wednesday, back on Thursday, and triceps on Friday. Even though the number of sets and the exercises were the same, it was found that the higher frequency routine resulted in superior muscle growth for all muscles measured. So it seems that higher frequencies may actually have a slightly larger positive effect on muscle growth than what was found in the previous meta-analysis. So it seems that training a muscle multiple times per week is probably better than training it only once per week. The exact magnitude of this effect is debatable depending on how you interpret the evidence, but there does seem to be somewhat of a positive effect. However, one question that we haven't answered yet is what frequency is most effective? Are higher frequencies always better? Or is there no real benefit going from training a muscle, let's say 2 times per week, up to 3, 4, or 5 times per week? This idea was explored in this study, which compared the effects of training a muscle 3 versus 6 times per week, with a volume-matched training routine. One group trained the full body 3 times per week, while the other group trained the full body 6 times per week, but with half the volume in each session. And as we can see, there were no clear benefits of either frequency. The only exception was the biceps, which actually saw negative results in the high frequency group for some reason, but I think this was due to random chance or some sort of statistical error, since all other measures were similar apart from this one. So disregarding this one measurement, there doesn't seem to be much difference when training with a very high frequency compared with a more moderate frequency. This research together probably suggests that training a muscle multiple times per week is likely to be superior to training it once per week. However, there is probably less additional benefit as frequency increases higher and higher. One reason that higher frequencies may be superior is due to the amount of per session volume we perform for any given muscle group. Obviously, a lower frequency means we must train a muscle with more volume in each session, while a higher frequency means we will train the same muscle with less volume per session, assuming total weekly volume is equated. For example, if we train a muscle with 12 weekly sets, a frequency of 1 time per week would mean that all 12 sets are performed in a single session. A frequency of 2 times per week means that 6 sets are performed per session, and a 3 time per week frequency means that 4 sets will be performed per session, and so on. So if we perform more volume for a single muscle in a session, fatigue of that muscle will accumulate, and our performance will diminish towards the end of the workout. On the other hand, a muscle trained with less volume in a workout won't accumulate as much fatigue, and performance won't diminish to the same extent. While workout performance and the hypertrophic stimulus don't have a direct relationship, training in a highly fatigued state probably doesn't provide as effective of a stimulus compared with training in a fresher state. This may be a mechanism explaining the benefits of higher frequency training. So we probably want to avoid performing too much volume in a single session for a single muscle group. Rather, if our weekly volume for a given muscle group is quite high, it may be best to redistribute this volume across more days throughout the week. This will likely have a positive effect on muscle growth outcomes. However, if a particular muscle isn't trained with a very high volume, then increasing frequency will probably have less benefit, if any benefit at all. As a general rule, if we are performing around 10 or more sets for a muscle group in a single workout, it may be a good idea to increase training frequency, and this will probably have a significant positive effect. However, if a muscle is trained with less than around 10 sets in a single workout, then we probably won't see as much of a benefit from increasing frequency. While these findings are generally applicable to most people, we should also remember that research usually reports the average results, not the individual results of each trainee. In reality, everyone is likely to have a slightly different response to different training methods. The individual response to different training frequencies was explored in this study, which had trainees perform single leg training 5 times per week with one leg and 2 to 3 times per week with the other leg. It was found that each trainee saw different results with the different training frequencies. For example, this trainee saw greater quad growth in the leg trained with a higher frequency compared with the leg that was trained with a lower frequency, while this trainee saw greater muscle growth in the leg being trained with a lower frequency compared with a higher frequency. However, it should be noted that volume wasn't equated in this study, so the results could have also been a result of different training volumes, not just different frequencies. In either case, we should just understand that there is likely to be differences in how each trainee may respond to different frequencies. For some, a lower frequency may provide superior results, whereas others may benefit from a higher frequency. Another consideration here is individualizing our training frequency for each different muscle group. Some claim that certain muscles will benefit from higher training frequencies as they recover faster, while other muscles benefit more from lower frequencies because they take longer to recover. There is speculation that this may be due to different muscles being more dominant in certain fiber types, where muscles with more slow twitch fibers are able to tolerate higher frequencies, while muscles which are more fast twitch dominant will benefit more from lower frequencies. While this is certainly a plausible theory, we unfortunately don't really have any direct research looking at this idea. However, we do have this study, which explored the effects of calf training with different loads. Since the soleus is more slow twitch dominant, it has been proposed that it may respond better to higher rep ranges, while the gastrocnemius is more fast twitch dominant and may respond better to lower rep ranges. It was found that there was a very slight trend in favor of higher rep ranges being slightly superior. But this trend was consistent for the soleus and both gastrocnemius heads, meaning that we didn't see the expected differential response for each of the calf muscles. So while this study wasn't directly on training frequency, it provides some evidence that different muscles probably don't respond differently solely based on their muscle fiber composition. Although we are extrapolating here, it provides some rationale that the fiber composition of a muscle probably won't influence how training frequency impacts hypertrophy. But until more research emerges, we can't be completely confident either way. And the last topic to discuss regarding training frequency is its indirect effects on volume. So far, we have only discussed how frequency influences muscle growth, assuming volume is equated. However, frequency can influence how much volume we perform, which is likely to have a bigger impact on muscle growth compared with frequency as an independent variable. Essentially, frequency can be used as a vehicle for volume. Increasing how many times we train per week, or increasing how often we train a specific muscle group, can increase the opportunity to accumulate volume. So increasing frequency can be a good strategy for lifters wanting to increase total training volume. Rather than simply doing more sets of an exercise or doing more exercises in a workout, trainees may opt to train a particular muscle on an additional day of the week to accumulate more volume. So to summarize this video, let's establish some practical recommendations. The first consideration to make regarding how many times per week a muscle can be trained is how many total times we work out per week. This is because training frequency for any given muscle is constrained by our workout frequency. Then, regarding muscle group frequency, from the evidence we have, it seems that training a muscle more frequently tends to have positive effects on muscle growth, even when total weekly volume is equated. However, the magnitude of its effects are likely to be dependent on per session volume for any given muscle group. If a muscle is being trained with a high per session volume, greater than around 10 sets in a single workout, then increasing frequency will probably have a larger positive effect on muscle growth. However, if a muscle is currently being trained with a lower per session volume, less than around 10 sets in a single workout, then increasing frequency will probably have minimal effect on muscle growth outcomes. So simply put, higher volume training will usually benefit more from high frequencies, while lower volume training won't benefit to the same extent. Furthermore, the indirect effects of frequency on volume accumulation probably have a bigger effect than the direct effects itself. Both higher workout and muscle group frequencies provide more opportunity to perform more total weekly volume, which we know has a major influence on muscle growth. So there is no single best number of times a muscle should be trained per week, rather it should be individualized based on your current individual circumstances. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Check out flowhighperformance.com for online coaching, training templates, ebooks, and more.